Since our thoughts, our thought patterns, and our beliefs create our life experiences, it becomes important to recognize when our thinking becomes distorted. This series explores the terms and thought patterns from Section 6 of our Spiritual Nutrition. By learning to recognize these patterns within ourselves, and by realigning our thinking with divine truth, we can begin to stop repeating the learned patterns that create negative outcomes, and gradually, we begin to experience greater peace in our lives. In this video, we will explore 4 related thought patterns from Section 6: righteous indignation, parentification, guilt, victim. Righteous indignation helps us recognize when harm or injustice has occurred. Parentification reflects the burdens and responsibilities we may have taken on far too early in life. When these experiences remain unresolved, guilt and victim consciousness can begin to develop, reinforcing patterns of self-blame, helplessness, and self-betrayal. Through awareness, reflection, and seeking guidance, we begin developing a deeper understanding of the beliefs and emotional patterns formed through these experiences. This process supports the healing of shame and powerlessness, while helping us reclaim personal agency, healthy boundaries, self-compassion, and a deeper connection to truth and self-worth. Core pattern. Righteous indignation represents the natural and justified anger we feel when harm, unfairness, or injustice occurs. As children, our caregivers often shut down our indignation immediately, for any number of reasons that had more to do with them than with us. What many of us learn from these experiences is something deeply limiting. It is not acceptable for me to feel upset about the ways I've been harmed. Over time, this belief can lead to self-betrayal. Instead of honoring our experience, we begin minimizing it. Instead of protecting ourselves, we learn to tolerate what should not be tolerated. We silence ourselves. We excuse harmful behavior. We prioritize the comfort of others while abandoning our own truth. Eventually, we may begin blaming ourselves for what happened, rather than recognizing that a boundary was crossed. How it manifests. This pattern may appear as difficulty expressing anger directly, freezing or shutting down when mistreated, defending or excusing harmful behavior from others, feeling guilty for having boundaries, suppressing emotional reactions in order to avoid conflict, chronic resentment hidden beneath politeness, emotional exhaustion from over-tolerating, fantasizing about finally being understood, validated, or vindicated, or swinging between long periods of silence and sudden emotional explosions. It sounds like, maybe I'm overreacting. It wasn't that bad. I don't want to cause problems. I should just let it go. Why do I always tolerate this? I feel angry, but I don't think I'm allowed to. No one protected me. Something inside me knows this was wrong. Spiritual effects. When this pattern remains active, it can contribute to disconnection from self-worth, loss of authentic self-expression, difficulty trusting your own inner truth, increased resentment and emotional suppression, repeated cycles of self-abandonment, attraction to unequal or emotionally unsafe relationships, and a persistent feeling of being powerless, unseen, or unheard. Physical effects. The body often carries what the mind has learned to suppress. This may show up as chronic tension or tightness, jaw clenching, headaches, stomach tension, emotional numbness or shutdown, anxiety around confrontation, sudden emotional outbursts after long periods of suppression, or exhaustion from constantly monitoring and managing your emotions. Origin of the pattern. This pattern often develops in environments where anger was punished, emotions were dismissed, obedience was valued over authenticity. Caregivers reacted defensively when confronted with accountability, or where a child learned that protecting the comfort of others was more important than honoring their own truth. From these experiences, the child may unconsciously conclude, "My feelings are dangerous. It is unsafe to object. Love requires self-silencing. I must betray myself in order to maintain connection." Changing the pattern. Healing begins by recognizing that anger itself is not wrong. Anger is information. It points towards something important. It tells us when a value has been violated, when a need has gone unmet, or when a boundary has been crossed. Part of healing involves learning the difference between healthy indignation and destructive rage. Healthy indignation protects dignity. Rage seeks to destroy. One honors truth. The other often emerges when truth has been suppressed for too long. Practice validating your emotional experience without minimizing it. Ask yourself, what boundary was crossed? What part of me needed protection? What truth have I been denying? Allow yourself to acknowledge injustice without shame. Practice expressing boundaries calmly, clearly, and honestly. Explore where you first learned that your emotions were unacceptable. And remember, my feelings matter. I am allowed to protect myself. Acknowledging harm is not selfish, and healthy anger can support truth, dignity, and self-respect. The goal is not to become angry. The goal is to become honest, to trust what you feel, to honor what is true, and to stop abandoning yourself when something inside you says, "This is not okay." Parentification. Parentification occurs when a child is placed into the role of caretaker, protector, mediator, or provider within the family system. Instead of being allowed to fully experience childhood, the child learns to become responsible for the emotional, physical, or psychological needs of others. What begins as adaptation often becomes identity. Core pattern. Parentification develops when a child consistently takes on responsibilities that were never meant to belong to them. This may happen when a parent or caregiver is emotionally unavailable, chronically ill, emotionally unstable, struggling with addiction, or absent through abandonment, work, or death. In these situations, the child often becomes what the family needs them to be: the caretaker, the peacemaker, the responsible one, the strong one, the one who holds everything together. Over time, the child unconsciously learns, "My needs are less important. I must take care of others to be loved or safe. It is my responsibility to hold everything together. I cannot relax. Other people's emotions are my responsibility." These beliefs can become so familiar that they no longer feel like beliefs. They simply feel like reality. Parentification may involve emotional caregiving, conflict mediation, excessive responsibility, or suppressing personal needs in order to maintain stability within the family. There are generally two forms. Emotional parentification occurs when the child becomes emotional support for adults. Practical parentification occurs when the child takes on adult responsibilities beyond what is developmentally appropriate. While these adaptations can create maturity, competence, and sensitivity, they often come at a significant cost. The cost may include emotional safety, healthy dependency, playfulness, self-development, and connection to one's own needs. How it manifests. This pattern may appear as feeling responsible for other people's emotions, difficulty relaxing or receiving support, hyper-independence, overfunctioning in relationships, becoming the helper, the fixer, or the therapist, feeling guilty when prioritizing self-care, experiencing anxiety when others are upset, difficulty identifying your own needs or desires, feeling emotionally exhausted from caring others, attracting relationships where others depend heavily upon you, or living with a constant fear of disappointing people. It sounds like, I'll handle it. I can't let people down. I need to keep everyone okay. My problems are not important. I feel selfish when I focus on myself. I had to grow up fast. If I stop helping, everything will fall apart. I don't know how to receive support. Spiritual effects. When this pattern remains active, it can create a deep disconnection from the authentic self. Love becomes confused with responsibility. Worth becomes confused with usefulness. And receiving can feel far more uncomfortable than giving. This may lead to chronic self-neglect, difficulty receiving love, care, or guidance, fear of vulnerability, fear of dependence, confusion about personal identity, and a feeling of being burdened, trapped, or emotionally responsible for everyone around you. It may also contribute to anxiety, grief, guilt, perfectionism, suppression, worry, obsessive thinking, or a lingering sense of victimhood and powerlessness. Physical effects. The body often reflects the weight of responsibilities it was never meant to carry. This pattern may contribute to chronic stress, nervous system exhaustion, anxiety and hypervigilance, burnout from over-responsibility, difficulty resting without guilt, emotional suppression, persistent fatigue, headaches, digestive stress, sleep disturbances, or constantly scanning the environment to ensure everyone else is okay. Origin of the pattern. Parentification often develops in family systems where caregivers were overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or unable to meet their own needs. Healthy boundaries may have been absent. Emotional roles may have become reversed. The child may have become emotionally needed by the adults around them. And in order to survive, the child adapts. From these experiences, the child often learns, love must be earned through caregiving. My value comes from what I provide. I am responsible for other people's well-being. There is no room for my own needs. Many children receive praise for being mature, helpful, responsible, or easy. Yet beneath that praise, they may be carrying burdens far beyond what a child was ever meant to carry. Changing the pattern. Healing begins by recognizing that caregiving was an adaptation. It was something you learned to do. It is not who you are. Begin exploring where responsibility became connected to love, approval, or worthiness. Practice identifying your own emotions, your own needs, and your own limits. Learn the difference between compassion and over-responsibility. Compassion cares. Over-responsibility carries. Compassion supports. Over-responsibility rescues. One is rooted in love. The other is often rooted in fear. Allow yourself to receive support without guilt. Practice setting boundaries without over-explaining. Ask yourself, What responsibilities truly belong to me? What happens when I stop overfunctioning? What needs did I suppress in order to care for others? Healing involves remembering I am worthy beyond what I do for others. I do not need to earn love through self-sacrifice. Other people's emotions are not my responsibility. I am allowed to rest, receive, and care for myself. Support and vulnerability are safe. The goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. To remember that your worth does not come from fixing or saving, or holding everyone together. Your worth was never dependent on your usefulness. It has always been inherent. And you are allowed, perhaps for the first time, to let someone care for you. Guilt. Guilt is the feeling that we have failed to meet an expectation, whether that expectation belongs to us or to someone else. But when guilt becomes chronic, it becomes a prison. Many people carry guilt far beyond what is necessary. They continue punishing themselves long after the lesson has been learned, long after the mistake has passed, long after healing could have begun. Guilt often tells us, I did something wrong. I am responsible. I should have done more. I should have known better. This happened because of me. I don't deserve to move on. And when these beliefs remain unchallenged, we can become trapped in an endless cycle of self-condemnation. Guilt, blame, condemnation, and remorse are often deeply intertwined. Together, they keep our attention fixed on the past. Yet no amount of self-punishment can change what has already happened. The past cannot be rewritten. It can only be understood, learned from, and used to inform the choices we make today. We do not live in yesterday. We live here, now, and only this moment can be changed through our actions. Sometimes parents carry guilt for the actions of their children. Sometimes children carry guilt for the struggles of their parents. Sometimes people carry guilt for surviving something others did not, or for not preventing pain they never truly had the power to prevent. In many cases, the burden being carried was never theirs to begin with. Guilt becomes especially painful when it becomes entangled with blame, perfectionism, over-responsibility, unresolved grief, fear, or the belief that making a mistake means being a bad person. How it manifests. This pattern may appear as chronic self-blame, difficulty forgiving yourself, over-apologizing, feeling responsible for other people's emotions or outcomes, fear of disappointing others, self-punishing thoughts or behaviors, becoming stuck in the past, excessive rumination over mistakes, difficulty receiving love, joy, or rest, overcompensating through perfectionism or people-pleasing, or carrying a constant feeling of emotional heaviness. It sounds like, I should have known better. This happened because of me. I don't deserve to move on. I could have prevented this. I feel bad relaxing when others are struggling. I always let people down. I need to make up for it. I can't forgive myself. Spiritual effects. When guilt becomes chronic, it can create a profound disconnection from self-compassion. It becomes difficult to trust yourself, difficult to receive love, difficult to experience peace. The mind becomes attached to the past, replaying old moments, searching for a different outcome that no longer exists. Over time, guilt can reinforce a shame-based identity, not merely, I made a mistake, but I am the mistake. This pattern may contribute to feelings of unworthiness, fear of making mistakes, difficulty taking healthy risks, reduced ability to remain present, and a loss of emotional freedom. Physical effects. The body often carries guilt as tension, as vigilance, as exhaustion, as heaviness. This may appear as anxiety, chronic emotional tension, depression, nervous system fatigue, difficulty resting, obsessive thinking, rumination, digestive stress, sleep disturbances, or withdrawing from others out of shame and self-protection. Origin of the pattern. Guilt often develops in environments where love or approval felt conditional, where mistakes were met with shame rather than understanding, where unrealistic expectations existed, where blame was projected onto the child, or where emotional boundaries were unclear. In these environments, the child may unconsciously learn, I am responsible for keeping others happy. Mistakes make me unworthy. I must punish myself when things go wrong. My value depends on meeting expectations. Guilt can also emerge after trauma, loss, survival experiences, or situations where a person believes they could have prevented suffering, even when they realistically could not. The mind often searches for control in situations where control never existed, and guilt becomes the story it creates. Changing the pattern. Healing begins by recognizing the difference between healthy accountability and chronic self-condemnation. Accountability asks, what can I learn? Condemnation asks, how long must I suffer? One supports growth, the other prolongs pain. Ask yourself, am I carrying responsibility that is not truly mine? What expectation am I trying to meet? What would compassion look like here? Am I trying to punish myself in order to feel worthy again? Practice learning from the past without remaining emotionally imprisoned by it. Allow mistakes to become opportunities for growth rather than evidence of worthlessness. Develop self-forgiveness, practice emotional honesty, and begin releasing the belief that suffering is required for redemption. Notice whether guilt may actually be covering something deeper: grief, anger, fear, sadness, or helplessness. Sometimes guilt remains because it feels easier to carry than the emotions underneath it. Healing involves remembering, I can learn without condemning myself. My mistakes do not define my worth. Punishment is not the same as accountability. I am allowed to heal, grow, and move forward. Compassion creates transformation more effectively than self-hatred. The goal is not to avoid responsibility. The goal is to stop carrying responsibility that was never yours, to learn from the past without living inside it, to recognize that growth does not require self-punishment, and to remember that healing begins not with condemnation, but with compassion. Because the part of you that made mistakes is the very same part of you that deserves understanding. And understanding is what makes transformation possible. Victim, core pattern. Victim is a thought pattern that says we have no power to change our life situation, no power to protect ourselves from other people's negative words or actions, or that anything negative in our life has been caused by anyone or anything but ourselves. It may also appear as the belief that there is no protection from all the dangers that exist in the world. While we cannot change past events, we can change our reactions to them, and thereby change our future. This pattern can often be traced to a traumatic childhood experience that has not been understood or resolved, which prevents it from being released. The pattern can also result from caregivers being either overprotective or underprotective. Feeling like a victim means that we are blaming others, and giving away our power. Being the victim of a crime can also be one of our many required life lessons. It is important to work through the thoughts, attitudes, and emotions surrounding the event, to seek understanding, to practice forgiveness, and to remember that while we cannot change past events, we can change our reactions to them and thereby change our future. How it manifests. This pattern may appear as feeling powerless or emotionally trapped, chronic blaming of others or circumstances, difficulty taking action or making decisions, expecting betrayal, rejection, or harm, feeling emotionally stuck in past experiences, repeating unhealthy relationship patterns, seeking rescue, validation, or saving from others, helplessness when facing challenges, difficulty recognizing personal agency, emotional dependency or learned helplessness, or frequent pity parties and emotional collapse. Sounds like I have no agency/power. Nothing I do matters. People always take advantage of me. I can't change this. Life is against me. No one understands what I've been through. I always end up hurt. There's no point trying. Why does this keep happening to me? Spiritual effects. Disconnection from personal power and agency. Difficulty trusting self or guidance. Emotional attachment to suffering and injustice. Fear-based perception of life. Feeling abandoned, unsupported, or unsafe. Resistance to growth due to fear of further pain, and reinforcement of a helpless identity. Physical effects. Chronic anxiety or fear, depression or hopelessness, emotional exhaustion, nervous system dysregulation or hypervigilance, difficulty feeling motivated or empowered, emotional shutdown or collapse, and chronic stress-related symptoms and fatigue. Origin of pattern. Victim consciousness often develops in environments where the child experienced trauma or instability. Emotional pain was not acknowledged or resolved. Helplessness became normalized. The child lacked protection or support. Personal boundaries were repeatedly violated. Or caregivers modeled blame, fear, or powerlessness. The child learns, I am unsafe. I cannot protect myself. Others have all the power. My life is controlled by external forces. Pain is unavoidable and permanent. The person may unconsciously continue recreating familiar emotional dynamics because the nervous system associates them with survival and identity. Change the pattern. Acknowledge the reality of past pain without allowing it to define your identity forever. Explore where helplessness became connected to self-perception. Ask yourself, what power do I still have right now? What choices are available to me? Am I giving away my agency through blame or fear? What would self-protection or self-support look like today? Practice distinguishing being harmed from remaining powerless, accountability from blame, compassion from helplessness. Focus on small, consistent acts of agency and self-trust. Develop emotional boundaries and self-protection skills. Allow grief, anger, and fear to be processed rather than suppressed. Practice forgiveness carefully and authentically, not as denial of harm, but as release from emotional imprisonment. Healing involves remembering, what happened to me is not the totality of who I am. I have the ability to respond differently moving forward. I can learn to protect and support myself. My past does not remove my capacity for growth. Acknowledging pain and reclaiming power can exist together. The past may explain where you are, but it does not determine where you go next. Each moment offers an opportunity to reclaim choice, to reclaim responsibility, and to reclaim the power that has always existed within you. Final notes on how righteous indignation, parentification, guilt, and victim connect. When a child experiences harm, unfairness, emotional neglect, or inappropriate responsibility, a natural response arises, righteous indignation, the inner recognition that something is not okay. However, in many environments, this indignation is suppressed, punished, ignored, or shamed. Instead of learning, my feelings matter. I deserve protection. The adults are responsible. The child often learns, I must take care of others. My needs create problems. I should not upset anyone. I am responsible for keeping the peace. This leads into parentification, where the child begins emotionally, mentally, or physically carrying responsibilities that do not belong to them. Over time, the child develops guilt whenever they prioritize themselves, express pain, set boundaries, disappoint others, or acknowledge anger and resentment. When these patterns continue unresolved, the person may unconsciously enter victim consciousness, feeling powerless, over-identifying with suffering, believing they must tolerate mistreatment, waiting for rescue, validation, or fairness from outside themselves. The core pattern. This sequence describes how self-betrayal develops when emotional truth is suppressed. Righteous indignation recognizes harm. Parentification redirects attention away from self and toward the needs of others. Guilt punishes self-protection. Victim consciousness develops when the person no longer believes they have agency, worth, or permission to honor themselves. The original wound is often not simply the painful experience itself. It is the inability to fully process, express, validate, and protect oneself afterward. The healing truth. Righteous indignation restores awareness that something harmful occurred. Parentification can be released by recognizing which responsibilities never belong to us. Guilt softens as we learn that self-care and boundaries are not selfish. Victim consciousness dissolves as we reconnect with personal agency, truth, and self-worth. Healing does not require denying pain or pretending harm never happened. Healing involves acknowledging reality honestly, grieving unmet needs, reclaiming emotional truth, developing healthy boundaries, and learning self-compassion instead of self-punishment. As understanding deepens, we begin shifting from self-betrayal to self-honoring, emotional suppression to emotional truth, over-responsibility to balance, powerlessness to conscious choice,